Honda refreshed the Pilot for 2026, and the press kit leads with a screen. Bigger touchscreen, bigger gauge cluster, Google baked in, and a few decibels of quiet subtracted from the cabin. All of it true and all of it verifiable from the passenger seat of a parked car at the dealer. There's exactly one change on this list you can't confirm without driving it, and Honda tucked it near the bottom. Retuned steering. So that's the job today. Everything else you can check standing still. This one, you have to drive. The V6 makes all of its power up top, which tells you how to drive it. If you lug it, it kind of sulks. Wind it out, and it pulls hard to redline like a good Honda engine should. It's a delightful contrast to just about everything else that delivers you that just off idle, peak torque, low RPM shove. Cruising along like this, the V6 asks to be revived and then rewards you for it on a 3-row SUV that nobody ever will drive like that. That's a small shame because the engine is the most willing thing in this building. Set this one beside the Turbo 4s and the Turbo 4 hybrids that seem to have dominated this class, and the difference is texture. This Honda V6 is smooth in a way that no Turbo 4 ever can be. There's no thrash, no roughness. There's also no synthesized sound coming through the speakers. It's just a V6 doing its job honestly and quietly. I don't think it's the last naturally aspirated V6 in the segment, but that list is short and it's shrinking. Honda held the line that most of its competitors abandoned, and this car is better for it. In day-to-day driving, the 10-speed automatic is smooth up and down the box, which is the job it was hired for. Put the transmission in sport, and it does the job that it's supposed to do. It holds gears longer, holds them through corners, all of those things, but when it comes to using the shift paddles, it's not perfectly committed to that bit. In manual mode, I've actually had it upshift on me mid-corner on part throttle when I really wanted it to hold the gear. If the drivetrain says it's not ready for a downshift and you ask for one, well, what'll happen is as the engine revs drop, it'll remember, and maybe a second or 2 seconds later, it'll actually perform that downshift. This is a Pilot, not a sports sedan, and most Pilot owners will never go looking for the edges of its manners. And those who do will definitely find it. Like any all-wheel drive system, this will send torque to the rear axle when it's requested, but it will also vector that torque to the outside rear wheel, which is the system's whole trick. It nudges the tail of the Pilot to sharpen turn in and take some load off the front tires. I suppose the diff does its part, but everything else in the system overrules the diff. Exiting a corner, pick up the throttle early or sloppily, and the Pilot will ease its way into some very safe understeer. Between the suspension geometry and the soft suspension settings, it's all decided that it should push rather than rotate. That's the right thing to do for the intended buyer of this Pilot, let's be honest, even if that trick differential gets overruled by the rest of the hardware. I mostly drove this in the dry and only in the lightest of rain, so real wet weather traction is going to have to wait for another day. Subscribers get notified when the next episode drops. Everybody else leaves it to the algorithm. If you want to see when our next episode hits YouTube, well, that's what the subscribe button's for. Yes, Honda retuned the steering for 2026, and it works. The steering rack itself is a little slower than I'd like, but it's appropriate for a 3-row crossover, just not quick enough to suit my tastes. But here's the thing, it's naturally strong on center in a way that electrically assisted steering systems never are. It feels weighted naturally instead of by algorithm, and it tracks dead straight with zero babysitting. Point it and it goes exactly where you aim without any of that artificial weight you feel in a lot of electrically assisted steering systems. It's close to what Mazda does, which in this company is high praise, and it turns out the one change for 2026 that you have to judge by driving is the best one. The brake pedal starts out soft, which is appropriate for a big crossover like this, and then once you get into the pedal, there's progressive modulation just beyond that initial bit of travel. There's plenty of stopping power, and feedback is better than most three-row crossovers. It's not quite at the level that Mazda does to tune their brake pedals, but it's close enough to notice. Even in emergency stopping situations, the ABS is well sorted, well calibrated for you to stop confidently and safely. In day-to-day use, the brakes are so well sorted that you never really think about it, which is kind of like a backhanded compliment. Body roll is measured. Thankfully, it tells you where the weight's going instead of masking it. Now, if you're really hustling this in the corners, and I don't think many Pilot owners will, if you push past 7/10, mid-corner bumps upset the body more than you'd really like. Those bigger but rare road undulations will do the same thing, with rebound damping not quite keeping up with the body. That's the comfort-oriented tuning of the suspension showing up near its limits, and I don't think many Pilot owners will get there. On the other hand, wheel control is excellent, and the suspension never comes across as underdamped in day-to-day driving. And this is the thing. Ride quality is where this Pilot excels. Among passive damper three rows that I've driven, not the ones with adaptive dampers deciding with millisecond precision what each damper should be doing, this is one of the best riding three rows I have ever driven. It breathes with the road instead of fighting it without any of that wallowy stuff that you would typically get from a softer, more comfort-oriented suspension tuning program. I expected this Black Edition's low-profile tires on these 20s to spoil some of the ride, but they actually didn't. I'm on one of the worst roads that I know, and sure, there's a little bit of noise that comes through into the cabin, but not a lot of vibration, not a lot of harshness. The suspension just soaks up all of these nasty bumps. If the roads are bad where you live, like they are with mine, this deserves a spot on your short list for this reason alone. If you'd like to support the channel beyond just watching, the link to the merch store is here, and your support there means more time for us to produce episodes like this and a little less time worrying about industry access. No pressure, just an option. The seating position is upright, and it took about a minute for me to get all of this sorted. There's a tremendous amount of reach in this steering wheel, and what I've had to do here to comfortably reach the pedals where I've got an effective seating position, I had to extend the reach of this steering column. But once I'm here, I've got a great interface to this wheel as well as to the pedals. I'm set up perfectly, but initially I was tempted to sit a little closer to the dashboard. Once I figured that out, I'm very happy here. The seat is big and it's comfortable and it's supportive enough that you're going to feel well rested after a long drive. I did take this on a longer drive than I anticipated, and it did exactly that for me. I was rested at the end of it, and for that reason alone, this would make a great long-distance cruiser. Honda's first and second level ergonomics are simple and straightforward, very easy to figure out where all of the controls are, and everything is in its right place, although I would say that these aren't quite as driver-centric as what you find in a modern Mazda. In here, there's two sore spots for me. One is that Honda insists on this push-button shifter, and there's got to be a better way, whatever Honda thinks. And this new touchscreen, as big and as modern as it sits proudly on top of the dash, and here in my correct seating position, it actually obscures a bit of the cowl. I'm actually surprised with that. There's got to be a better way to integrate this into the dashboard, and yes, the system works wonderfully, but the top of the screen just kind of gets in the way of some things, especially when you're driving in a busy urban environment like I do. Google's now built into the system so it can learn your commute and recommend a restaurant on your way. So your Pilot is quietly joining the surveillance economy, just like the rest of your devices did 10 years ago. Progress reaches the school run at last. Now, inside this cabin, that's where the Black Edition earns its name. Forget about all the black trim on the outside. This interior is stunning. Materials are top-notch throughout, but there's some proper detail work going on for this Black Edition. For example, in the shoulders of these seats, there's some suede microfiber, adds a lovely touch. Plus, contrasting red stitching and the perforated leather actually hints at a little bit of red coming through those perforations. And overall, this interior comes off as premium, not something you'd typically associate with Honda, more like Acura premium. And on a long distance drive, there's nothing in here that's going to grate on you or your passengers because it's just a lovely place to be. On the practical side, Honda's gotten all of the small things right in here. There's a tremendous amount of storage for all your stuff, but it's also very clever the way they've laid it out. Yes, there's storage in the doors, but the bottle holders in the doors are cleverly placed. There's plenty of storage underneath the armrest. Of course, a couple of cup holders here. The wireless charging pad easily accessible. And then if you need, there's a 12-volt outlet and a couple of USB ports. There's a modest amount of storage space with the third row upright. And when you lower that third row, and it's actually very easy to drop that third row, there's a tremendous amount of storage. You can fit all kinds of things underneath that hatch without ever having to worry about lowering the second row. With respect to visibility, of course, it's a 10 out of 10. You've got tall glass all around, large outboard mirrors, and all of the cameras you could ever need to assist with your parking lot adventures. It's a wonderfully usable interior for the daily grind, and for anybody cross-shopping anything in this segment, that's more important than any headline number on the spec sheet. If this episode gave you more information than a brochure or a press release, well, hit the like button. It tells YouTube to share this with other people like you interested in an episode like this. Takes just a second. That's what the pilot told me after a week behind the wheel. Here's what owners are saying after months or years with a pilot in their own driveways. The ventilated seats, a premium comfort selling point, move air without cooling it, owners say, the fan louder than the effect. People who bought the black edition for cool seats describe paying flagship money to sit on a hairdryer. Some owners say that their wireless charging pad charges for a few minutes, then quits, and then warms the phone instead. Some owners say that sometimes there's a flashing metal object error at the phone with nothing between the phone and the charging pad. The owner fixes to give up and use a cable, but I will say in my experience I use the charging pad quite a bit and zero issues. Some owners say that the transmission jerks through a 1-2 upshift when you're leaving from a stop, and it's worse when it's cold. Honda pushed a software update for it, and owners are split on whether it did anything. One long-term Black Edition owner says his is still too abrupt past 13,000 miles and a later update. Once again, my experience with this tester was absolutely flawless at low-speed acceleration. Normally, this is where I would agree because owners say that fuel economy runs backward. For me, I've been getting decent mileage. It's rated at 21 combined, and owners routinely see high teens in mixed driving, and several say it drinks more than the older Pilot they traded in, the one with fewer gears. More ratios, worse mileage. None of that's on the spec sheet or shows up in a week behind the wheel. If you own one of these or have some quality seat time behind the wheel of one of these, let me know in the comments what I got right and what I got wrong, because real-world owner experiences are much more valuable than anything I can learn in a week-long press loan, and I always read those comments. The job here was to drive the one change you couldn't check standing still, the retuned steering. I did through corners and out on the highway, and the verdict is the opposite of a shrug. Honda fixed the thing electric racks usually get wrong and landed on a neutral, strong-on-center weight that plenty of sportier cars never manage. So the invisible upgrade is the real one. Everything that shows up in the brochure, you can confirm at the dealer. This is the one you had to drive, and as far as I'm concerned, it was worth the drive. So who is this for? It's for anyone shopping a three-row crossover who wants to be looked after rather than entertained, and especially anyone who still wants a naturally aspirated V6, since inside Honda's range, this is the only place left to get one. And a word for buyers out there, don't talk yourself into 3 rows unless you really need it. If you don't need 3 rows, the 2-row Passport's right there, and I'd take one over a Pilot without hesitation, because I don't need 3 rows. Same family, fewer compromises, especially when the extra seats leave the equation. Hyundai will sell you a Palisade that looks $20,000 more expensive. And I think every Pilot shopper knows it and signs for the Honda anyway. The badge on the outside of this thing has never cost anyone a night's sleep. Honda built the 2026 Pilot story around something you had to drive in order to be able to judge it. And for once, the marketing undersold it because the Retuned steering is the best thing on the list of updates for 2026. It feels natural and gives you a lot of confidence in a way that should shame some more expensive, more sporting-oriented cars. And Honda put this steering on every trim in the Pilot range, and as far as I'm concerned, that's what should decide it for you if you're looking at something in this segment. Here, you're paying for the Black Edition badges, the black wheels, some lovely interior materials and some red stitching, but none of that changes how this drives. This Pilot does exactly what it promises, no more and no less. There's none of that luxury spec delight and surprise beyond that glorious engine and this lovely interior. So if a 3-row is your non-negotiable, consider buying the cheapest Pilot with the kit that you want, and you'll enjoy this steering update for free. But if 3 rows aren't your thing, consider the Passport on the other side of the showroom. That's the Honda Pilot. Subscribe if you want to see more episodes like this. Don't if you don't. Comments are open if you disagree. And if you'd like to help fund more episodes like this, the link to the merch store is here. See you on the next one.